the rusty tins in my attic. Whereas if you say, you know, you go to the director of all the early Nick Cave videos, it's all gone. They just throw it out because the final master was all you wanted. But now with HD, the final master's no good. Yeah. So they just threw it all out, and for some reason I kept it.
The first person you thank, and I'll be careful with this, because the first person you thank even before you put your credit is Tiger. Will you please welcome to the stage the man behind that film, Richard Lowenstein. How do you you've been travelling all around the world watching this film in front of audiences. Your relationship with Michael goes back decades. How do you feel watching a film like that again in front of an audience? I saw you were sitting down there earlier.
I was, yeah, it's...
Oh, there we go. Yeah.
We're working. Yeah. It's hard when it's 3 times a day, but today's okay. It's
Today's
sort of,
okay?
yeah, and I ran out in the middle, but it is a bit emotional to watch it. It's less emotional editing it, actually, because you're just focusing on a little section of it. But seeing it, you know, seeing your friend sort of live and pass away 3 times a day can get a bit stressful, yeah.
So where does your relationship with Michael and INXS begin? Because your company produced most of their music videos, is that correct?
Yeah, back starting in 1984 with Burn For You, we just got a call out of the blue. We'd done Hunters and Collectors, Talking to a Stranger, and I'd made a feature film, Strikebound, and then we got a call out of the blue from a kind of crazy manager saying, come up to Mackay in North Queensland and start filming. And so we did, and then we ended up in London on that same video, and then through that process got quite friendly with all the band members, and specifically Michael, who was, you know, really made an effort to connect to the whole Melbourne zeitgeist that I came from, and Hunters and Collectors and all that sort of street cred that brought about. He was desperate for that Melbourne street cred, which he got.
Yeah.
You know.
Was it apparent to you very early on that he had a very special star quality? Did you realise that early on, or did it gradually dawn?
Well, it was apparent as soon as he stood up from the Banana Lounge out there was, you know, 6 of them when we first met around a pool in Mackay in Queensland. And as soon as he stood up from a Banana Lounge and walked towards me, I thought, Jesus, this guy's got charisma. I didn't necessarily connect that with, oh, he's going to be great on film. But as we filmed and as we did some of the music videos, it became very obvious that there was something special that would jump out of the screen. And then he's... and that doesn't always mean acting, you know, it just means screen presence. So then literally just hanging out with him and seeing his abilities of mimicry and sort of telling a story, and that's what struck me as like, this guy's got something on screen, you know, like as an actor too.
You've directed drama films, He Died with a Falafel in His Hand, you've made documentaries, you've worked in TV. There's been a lot of coverage of Michael Hutchence over the years, lots of, you know, tell-all interviews and documentaries. Why did you decide this was the time to do it?
I basically didn't see anything in any of those things, the dramas, the documentaries, all the variety of things, that reminded me or even had even a semblance of the person I knew. And so there was a personal reason, like I thought, you know, when I go or when all the people that knew him go, that there won't be any accurate history of this musical figure, this part of Australian history. But there's also, on top of that, there was just the uniqueness of his story. It wasn't just a normal story growing up and 6 guys in a garage. It was quite a unique and psychologically unique story, like a Greek tragedy, you know, complete with, you know, Oedipus sort of complex and Narcissus and all, you know, it's like, and Zeus throwing sort of bolts of lightning down and knocking him off his perch, and it was crazy when you put the story together.
Whenever you see a film like this, particularly a music documentary, maybe because I'm a craven TV producer, my first brain goes to what was the hardest bit of footage or the hardest talent to get involved. So everyone's just watched it. What's the shot in there that took the most effort to get?
Well, it's a two-pronged question. The hardest person to get involved was Helena Christensen, and she...
Really, I had my money on Kylie.
Kylie was quite easy because we had been friends back when she was with Michael, and she's just such a trusting, loving, lovely person, and she absolutely loved Michael and wanted his legacy put down accurately, and so she just opened her archive. Helena was very protective because of what she'd experienced with the assault/stroke accident, and she'd literally personally promised Michael never to speak about it. And but she did also realise that without her saying her part of the story, that no one would ever remember him in a fair and equitable way. So she did decide for the first time ever to get that, do that interview, and also offer us some photographs and stuff like that. The most remarkable footage we turned up is the Kylie and Michael on the boat in Hong Kong Harbour, because Kylie would tell me this great story about their first date, and then she sort of said, and Michael was filming on a camera, and we're going, oh, where's that film? And she was going, oh, probably that crooked lawyer that stole everything took it. And then in the process of making the film, I had a lot of stuff in my attic, and I get a phone call from the laboratory and saying there's all this footage of Michael and Kylie on a boat in Hong Kong Harbour in your own footage. And I'm going, how the hell did that get there? And apparently what had happened, and I still don't recollect this, but he'd come back from that holiday and given me, the little Kodak boxes and handed them to me and said, get this processed because I have no idea. And I did that. It was in the rushes of some of our music videos in amongst all the sync takes, and that just turned up. And it was unbelievable. I was sort of preparing for the big archive search around the world. Where is this footage that Michael... And then it was in my own attic.
Which is why you should never clean up your house. Hoard everything all the time.
That's an interesting point, because majority of music video clip directors of the 80s would throw out all their outtakes, and I'm a bit obsessive. My mother was a librarian. I just kept the rusty tins in my attic. Whereas if you say, you go to the director of all the early Nick Cave videos, it's all gone. They just throw it out because the final master was all you wanted. But now with HD, the final master's no good. Yeah. So they just threw it all out, and for some reason I kept it.
Mm. The first person you thank, and I'll be careful with this, because the first person you thank, even before you put your credit, is Tiger, Michael's daughter. Why the first credit to her?
Well, I'm a bit hesitant to say too much because Tiger's a very private person, and absolutely didn't want any publicity from this film and everything. But she was very instrumental in enabling us to get the INXS music. I got to say, INXS management were not approving of the film at the beginning. They couldn't control it. They wanted right of final cut, and they wanted to, control their own image and how many songs of INXS I would use and all that. They would also more than likely would have stopped any solo works coming in. So I couldn't actually give them right of final cut for a variety of reasons. And it was only Tiger's intervention at the end of the film, once it had all been made without the music, that enabled the band and the management to finally, say, here's the music. So she gets a very special thank you.
So was there a moment in time where this film might have had to have been released without any of INXS's music?
Absolutely. There was a year and a half of editing without INXS music, and no one believed we could make it an engrossing film, and I was sure that I could. And we did, but it was obviously a better film with INXS music. And that's literally the point where everyone was saying, yes, well, this will work, and it tells a great story, but there's a part of it really missing, And we had the INXS cover versions. It wasn't so much the master recordings, it was the publishing that we had issues with. So we could use cover versions that did like The Loved One, which is a cover version. So, but yeah, all the great songs we know and love were unavailable to us, but there is a version, and it works quite well, except missing.
Do you guys have questions? Are there things you'd like to know about the making of the film? There's always this blank moment when you ask that question on a stage where everyone's, oh shit, I didn't realise it was a part of it. But yeah, here we go.
Our friend.
Was there a question down there? What we're going to do is we're going to get the lovely cuddly bouncy mic.
Yes.
It's on its way to you.
No one's got it.
I think
shout.
Shelley ran
Try
off for
shouting
it.
and we'll repeat the question.
There we go,
There's
the cuddly mic.
Cube. Yeah.
Well, anyway, I'm a massive fan of Richard. Just as you're a photographer, live music photographer.
That filmmaker thing.
Filmmaker, and what got you inspired, and how did the kind of the paths align for you to meet Michael and meet INXS?
You mean back at the origins? Yeah. Well, it was basically, as I said, a phone call out of the blue where Michael had seen the Talking to a Stranger video and decided he wanted one of them, and because that sort of did. I mean, Hunters and Collectors were a very cool Melbourne band. They weren't nearly as commercially successful as INXS, but it's sort of like Hunters wanted the success of INXS and INXS wanted the coolness of Hunters. And so I do think it was his first idea was to get a video, because as videos were just, becoming very powerful at that stage, getting a video that looked like the Hunters and Collectors video. And there's also another connecting thread. There was one of his best friends was a guy called Greg Pirano, who was the percussionist in Hunters and Collectors. So he rings up Greg and says, who's the guy that did your video? And Greg says, oh, it's that Richard guy. And then the rest is history, yeah.
Who else has questions? There's a person at the back. Unless you are stretching. Were you stretching? Wait for the cube.
Wait for the cube. There it is.
Strong catch.
Could I ask Richard what his favourite video that he made with INXS was?
The Mystify one at the end of the... I always wanted to do the Mystify. I thought they... Actually, when they did the Kick album, they sent me a cassette and basically said, which song can you do the best video to? And first of all, I said Need You Tonight. And then I said, and the next one would be Mystify. But they didn't release it until like the 5th single. I'm sure it would have been another #1. So I've spent sort of 30 years waiting to finally do it, which is why it ends the film. But Need You Tonight, I think, is probably my most enjoyable. And the follow-up, the one that comes after Mediate, yeah.
It's we were talking in the car on the way over to both you and the wonderful editor of the film as well.
Taylor.
Where are you?
Over there, yes.
Yeah, there she is.
The red dress.
Yeah, actually, yes.
Like the song.
And what I was fascinated to hear from both of you is that you did a bunch of test screenings with people and friends and family.
Yes.
And that Mystify was not always going to be the ending of the film, was it?
No, we kept swapping songs. And at one stage, we had By My Side as the last song, and it was so unbearably sad that everyone sort of felt they'd been hit by a truck, and we probably wouldn't be having this Q&A because you're just like, oh dear, and also ultimately By My Side wasn't written by Michael, so we did swap it and test screened it again, and it did leave everyone with a much more alive feeling, like because you had to. Once you have your hero, pass away, you have to sort of remember the spirit of the person and bring the spirit up. And this version of Mystify with all that footage, and especially on Wembley, it was really beautifully filmed, and he really was at his peak. So we ended up swapping it to Mystify, and the whole dynamic kind of changed at the end. Yep.
Who else has a question? There's one right down the front here. We'll wait for Cube.
Here comes the Cube. Here we go.
Talking to. you've done this so well, and
Thank you.
I think you've just showcased him so well, and he was a lovely and a most beautiful person. You mentioned you did like 1.5 years of editing, and you also mentioned you were playing a little bit with the end and how it also then changed the Mystify. But knowing him and putting so much of your, your love and all of your memories into it, is there anything in this that you wish you could have put in that you haven't?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I wished it could be a 4-hour film, it's like...
Can you do another one?
Yeah, well, there's going to be heaps of DVD extras because we had lots of sequence. In the process of getting to this, it's deceptively simple what you see, but, there's sort of perhaps another hour of cut sequences that we then have to cut out because, it's for a variety of reasons. Even there's a 10-minute section about him acting that we spent, months over, and I adamant it was an important part of the story, refused to cut it out, and finally, everyone, including the collaborators in our company and making the film, the editors, we all decided it was probably better out than in, because it became, when you're sitting in a cinema, different television, you're very aware of when people start sort of moving in their seats and going, this is going on too long, and, like, we know the ending, when are we going to get there? And so even though it's all this lovely sequence about his acting career, and we had amazing footage from behind the scenes of Dogs in Space and other films, the Roger Corman film, the Frankenstein Unbound, he actually filmed his own footage, behind-the-scenes footage. We had all this amazing stuff, but it sort of was slowing the storytelling down. And one of my most important things was keeping the story moving and also speaking to people who weren't INXS fans or weren't even Michael fans. You had to sort of, you had to make the film as if the person sitting in there had never heard of anything that you're about to tell. So, the storytelling, the pacing of the story won out. But there's, as I said, heaps of DVD extras coming,
Well, thank you for making
Thank
it.
you. Well, thank you for your comments.
This might seem like an obvious question, but typically speaking, when one makes a documentary, it is filled with famous talking heads that you can put into a promo.
Yes.
You opted not to do that. You get this stream of consciousness, like people talking directly into your mind as you're seeing Michael.
Yes.
Why not the talking heads?
There's a couple of reasons. There's some very prosaic, which is, I'll start with the prosaic ones. I just didn't want people looking at the talking heads and say, oh, they haven't aged well, or they have aged well, or there's a little bit of work going on there. And but I also, the most important one is I didn't really want to throw you back and forth in time all the time. I didn't want to bring you forward to 2018 or whenever I filmed those talking heads and then take you back again into the past. I wanted to actually start off with a journey in time, even though it's out of order sometimes, non-linear. It's take you back into the era and keep you there. And then, so when you hear, it's like people's voices don't really age, or they age a little bit, but faces and images do. So I really, on certain documentaries, unless the talking heads are telling you something about your story, I didn't want to see the person crying or the person, it's like, but I loved hearing them. And also, another really prosaic reason is that I had so much great footage of Michael, and we've only got 100 minutes, and they wouldn't, my producers wouldn't allow me more than 105 minutes. And why waste it on 20 minutes of talking heads? Just go back and tell the Michael story and not the talking heads people's story.
Great answer. Who else has a question? We've got time for one or two more.
Thank you. You knew him quite well, and you obviously had an incredible amount of footage, but you obviously also maybe got some insights that you didn't know, or from a different perspective.
Yes.
Did your perspective then of him as the person that he was, did it change through making the film, or did it stay with pretty much who he was and you just had extra layers?
No, I think I think my knowledge of him grew and that's one of the reasons I wanted to make the film. But basically, I realised in the process of the film making that we were dealing with a much more complex character than I ever knew myself. I mean, there was a danger as an Australian male bonding with another Australian male. There's a danger of just sort of going into the parties and having the fun and not really thinking about the person that you're actually, you're connecting with, because you're just there, you don't know they're going to pass away soon, and you're just experiencing the good times. And Michael was in love with giving his friends the good times. Like, this is what it's like to be a pop star, but it's no fun doing it by myself, so come along. And that's one of the reasons I focused on the girlfriends, because they were experiencing the Michael. They would wake up with him, go to bed with him, see him crying, see him curled up in the bathtub in the fetal position. They, stuff that the Aussie male doesn't hear about from their best friend. So I was discovering in the process someone much more complicated than even I thought. But that was the agenda of the film. I didn't think Australia or the world actually knew who he was. They just knew this sort of stereotype, the long-haired, louche, womanising rock star, who dated supermodels. And especially in Britain, I think they were brutal, and still are, about the cliches and the stereotypes they put him into, because they're far more interested in Sir Bob and Paula and all that stuff, and then suddenly there's this dirty dingo or whatever they called him coming and violating their, like Paula was Princess Di or something. And so it was, I did learn, just how prismatic and how he would show different parts of himself to different people, and that part of my job then became putting all those different aspects of who he was into one portrait, so that, so I really appreciated his complex, I actually didn't realise the secrets that he was holding within him to the very end. I literally thought I was going in to make a film about someone whose loss of smell and taste had sort of caused his demise, and I didn't realise the full extent of what Helena was going to tell me, or the coroner's report, or all these things. So, yeah, it was. I just didn't expect the secrets,
Do we have time for one more? Who else has got a question? Oh, yep.
Without naming names, have any of the INXS guys or team members and Michael's family and friends seen the documentary yet, and have they voiced their opinions on it?
They've all seen the 3 INXS members who are still in Australia have seen it. I don't think Andrew Farris has, but he trusts his other band members. But the 3, Kirk, John and Tim, saw it in a screening in Sydney and were very emotionally overcome and kind of loved it, but basically said, I don't want to do that in public. I don't want to actually watch the film in public, because every time they watch, it represents something very big to them, not just the loss of a friend, the loss of a lifestyle, the loss of a career. And so it's a very private grieving that they have. And I think that goes for a lot of the people in the film. A lot of them didn't want to come, Michelle, Kylie, Helena didn't want to come to any screening at all in public, because, it means a hell of a lot. As far as family and friends, they all, Tina, Rhett are the only 2 surviving family, and Tiger, of course. They all saw it and approved and loved, and, I think there's some few niggly little things Rhett and Tina might have that, but they got emotionally overcome. And when it screened at the Sydney Film Festival, there was, at least 20 to 50% of the audience were friends of Michael, and so it was kind of universally welcomed. And I think people just liked the fact that it's the first time that it was, you saw the story that with a sense of authenticity on who he was, and without all the salacious gossip and the stuff that was all over the headlines at the end, which was about the autoerotic stuff. So I think it was a relief for most people that had kind of been put into context and put to bed, hopefully. So,
All right. This movie is going to be showing. It is showing at big screens
it's
at the
showing
moment.
at the
So
moment.
if now you guys have seen it, make sure you tell your friends to go see it. It'll also be on TV screens later in the year, I believe.
It's really good in stereo, Dolby stereo sound 5.1 and everything. So it's really worth seeing in a proper cinema.
All right. Give them a round of applause, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you.
Enjoy your last
Thanks
day
for
of Splendor
coming.
in the Grass. Thanks so much, guys.
In a proper cinema.
All right. Give them a round of applause, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you.
Enjoy your last
Thanks
day
for
of Splendor in
coming.
the Grass. Thanks so much, guys.